And so what helps to anchor me is that is what God wanted me to say.
Oh,
and that's what I said what I said.
Ekemini Uwan, co-author of one of my favorite books, Truth's Table, Black Women's Musings on Life, Love, and Liberation. Welcome to George Fox Talks. I'm Leah Payne. I am a professor here, a historian, and also I hear that I am a co-music appreciator.
Yes, absolutely.
Yay.
I love music.
Okay. Well, I write a lot about music and culture and politics and evangelicalism. And I'm so excited to talk with you about this because of your public voice and your special insight into this world. I wonder if I could just start with a simple question, which is, do you remember, or what music was the first music you remember forming you as a person of faith?
As a person of faith. Okay. Yeah, I was like, wait, no, that's a different answer.
Well, we could do both. We could do,
Yeah. Sure, that's true. We could. So I grew up in a house that was filled with music. My dad has a very serious record collection.
Oh, cool.
He has since, passed away many years ago, but we still have, the records. And so I know, right? It is cool, right?
Yeah.
So just kind of like some memories and relics of, just kind of how he was. And so he threw house parties like every weekend.
He did?
Up.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's a house.
It's a fun dad.
Soul Train house, And so grew up around music. Every weekend, the house, our little, 2-bedroom apartment was always jumping quite literally. And so the first song that comes to mind, or just artist that comes to mind, is actually Jimmy Cliff. So reggae artist. Yeah. So I just grew up with the sounds of like the diaspora. So from R&B to soukous to reggae, all of that was to high life, which is a genre of West African music as well, Afrobeat, all of that. But yeah, Jimmy Cliff, my dad loved Jimmy Cliff. And so I think about Many Rivers to Cross, which is such a deep song. Bob Marley, he really loved a lot of reggae. So I grew up on that. Yeah. And then of course everything else from Stevie Wonder, like Hayes and all of that. So that would be like definitely like the roots of my music. And I love music a lot. And then faith formation, 90s gospel, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I came to faith early 2000s, early aughts.
Right.
Okay. That's what the people are saying now.
Yes.
Early aughts.
It is what they say.
I was like, I don't think I get it.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's fine. Don't have to know everything. So I was like, okay, early aughts. So anyway, and I just remember listening to, there was a compilation CD that I got. And one of the songs on there was If It Had Not Been for the Lord, which is a classic like gospel song by Dorinda Clark Cole.
Yes.
Who was one of my favorite gospel artists.
Oh, yeah.
So 90s.
Love it.
Early aughts, but late, 90s kind of gospel is what I came up on. So like Donnie McClurkin, Fred Hammonds. That's where I live musically. That's right. Bread of exactly. Lord of the Harvest, all of that. So that's where I live when it comes to like faith music. It's just 90s gospel.
I love it. You don't even need to
early
leave.
Aughts.
Yeah.
And I won't. I will not. And so I think about that compilation. And that was really the first. Well, no, technically, Kirk Franklin's What You're Looking For was my first gospel album, like a true kid of the 90s.
That's amazing. That's kind of like iconic.
I wasn't yet in the faith yet, but, Stomp was the thing.
Yeah.
And, all of that. But really what was really formative once I did come to faith was that this gospel compilation album that I had.
I love that.
Dorinda Clark Cole's If It Had Not Been for the Lord was on there. And just some other songs that, really shaped me. It was like my first introduction into this.
Who introduced you to that?
So that was my church at the time, which was Hope's House Christian Ministries in the San Fernando Valley in California. And so that was I went to the Bible study on campus, there at Cal State Northridge. And when I don't know if it's my first time in the Bible study or what, but they gave you a little a little gift or something. And
Right.
I remember a CD that lets you know what
early
where I
odds.
was.
That's it. That's
early
it.
odds,
Yeah.
right? And one of the CD that was in there was this compilation album, and I was like, okay, and I just popped it in, and it was in my dorm room, and I just started listening,
that
to
is
it.
so cool.
I know, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love how music can, just take you to a really specific version of yourself, a specific point in time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What kind of music, when you're in a season of just needing comfort or needing solace, is there, I don't know, do you have a go-to?
It depends on what's happening, right? What are the circumstances? Is it a breakup? It's just something else. Lord, then I have my whole, let me go to Erykah Badu. Let me go to, I'll kind of go to, it just kind of depends what's going on here. And then sometimes when I'm just just kind of crying out before the Lord, then I'll, a song that I really love is by I Am Son. And it's, called Always With Me, and within parentheses it says a song for anxiety, which is just I just love this. I just love this song.
That's what the doctor ordered.
Exactly. I think he released it last year or so, but it's such a blessing to me. So it kind of depends on what's going on, but I'll go to either my R&B classics, like that, or I'll go to some of my gospel. And that's surprising because, that's a newer song. That's from last year. So stepping out a little bit. And then,
I love that so much.
So I'll do that. And then there's this one, this one ministry that I love so much. I do love Shekinah Glory, but it's a different one. It's Michael Lowry and Berean. It's a pastor that's out of Las Vegas. And they have this double disc.
Yeah.
Again, throwing it back. Double disc CD where it's just literally recast songs, psalms, actual psalms.
Oh, neat.
Where they're just singing the word of God and scripture, just not even just the psalms. But I just love it. And so I was my CD, I played it so much that the CD broke. And I was and I found it on YouTube that they put the album. I was like, oh my gosh.
That's wonderful.
Anyway, so there's one song that I love so much. It's called based off of Psalms 25. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Oh my God, I trust in thee. Don't let me be ashamed. And it's just the way that they cast it, the way that they sing it, on a loop. It's for me, I need the repetition.
Right.
To get it from here to here.
Right.
It's such a blessing. It's a song that I feel like I've played consistently since 2008-ish or 9. I mean, it's a long time.
Ooh, that's amazing.
So I just love it so much.
I love that.
What about you, though? I mean, I know that you're one, but
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also a child of the 90s.
Yeah.
When I think about music that was formative for me, I'm a pastor's kid.
Yeah.
So I was raised in a very charismatic West Coast denomination. I was raised in the Foursquare Church. And
yes. I'm familiar with Foursquare.
Okay, yeah.
Being from California, yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's big in California.
It is.
And my dad was a Foursquare pastor, small church, not anything that anybody would have known about. But he and my mom were a part of the West Coast kind of hippie revivals called the Jesus Movement.
Yes, I know about
70s.
it. Yeah.
So I was raised on that kind of hippie Jesus music.
Kind of folky. Okay.
Yeah. So people like Keith Green and Randy Stonehill. And then I ended up after college working in the music business in contemporary Christian music for a little while.
Oh, you worked? Wow.
I did. Okay. Yeah. It was one of my first jobs out of college.
Wow. Inside track.
Yeah. It's funny. I got the job working at a coffee shop in Nashville, and then a music producer, a guy named Charlie Peacock, who's very well known in CCM. He and his wife were my customers at a Starbucks in Nashville. This is kind of like a very like a CCM kind of story. Yeah. And so I worked for him for a while. But when I was a teen, I think it was probably because I was raised in the church. At that time, in the kind of predominantly white evangelical world, contemporary Christian music was seen as pretty uncool for, teens of a certain age. So
That's
I didn't
true.
really listen
Okay.
to it a lot. I thought it was just So, I'm just like a classic, very basic 1990s, like Alanis Morissette, that kind of stuff.
Alanis is a girl.
Anyway, it's good anger music if you're looking for them.
Alanis is great.
Yeah. So anyway, but then I started to think about that music as formative, having a message, and having definitely certain political and social outlooks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And actually I'm super excited to have this conversation because
yes.
in the book that I've written, and thank you so much for suggesting that we put it up here. This is so funny to me. I love it.
Do it.
I love it. Your Truth's Table, your podcast, has a place in this book.
Wow.
Yeah, because
honored.
I'm honored. Because of a conversation that a very famous artist, Lecrae, had on your podcast.
Oh yeah. That's right.
And so for those who are rightfully super fans of the Truth Table podcast, I am, they will remember that Lecrae came on your podcast to have a really important conversation about race and ethnicity and evangelicalism and his own relationship to white evangelicalism.
Yes.
And I wondered, I have so many questions for you about that.
Yeah.
In part, I think the first question I have is, you co-created a podcast that was a site for having a really important conversation. Lecrae's a big deal. He could have gone to a lot of different places and been in a lot of different settings and had this kind of conversation. But he chose Truth's Table.
Yeah.
Maybe you chose him. Maybe, But I just wanted to know, how have you gone about creating a place where you can have a really important conversation like that?
Yeah, gosh, it's a good question. We honestly, when we started Truth's Table, we didn't quite know much about podcasting, to be honest. None of us were really podcast listeners.
Yes.
Sorry to the podcast listeners. But we were not, we were just like, okay, we'll give it a try and see. We didn't quite know that this was, we're ministry people, right? So whatever we do, we're going to do it as unto the Lord and proclaiming the gospel and all that. I don't know that we knew we are building a ministry. This is actual business. Like, this is a whole discipline, I think we were just really walking by faith and just going forward and just being faithful. We knew that there was not a voice out there or anybody out there that was speaking at the intersection of politics, culture, race, gender, from a robust Christian theological lens in the podcast world, at least at that point. And honestly, in some ways, and especially from the social location as Black women.
Right.
And in some ways, I think that's still the case, actually. I still think that by God's grace, we are still one of one, and that there aren't, that I know of, and I could be missing. Please throw them out if I'm wrong.
I'm sure you know it better than I do.
There are other podcasts out there that do what Truth's Table does in the way that we do it, and I'm so grateful for that. It kind of speaks to our own unique ways that God's created us and formed and fashioned us, right? And just kind of like how He's put us in His own like niche and lane, that's hard to duplicate. And so I think that just by trying to be faithful, being true to who we are, and I think people know us independently, outside of Truth's Table, because our ministry in some ways predates, Truth's Table, and God willing will outlast Truth's Table whenever that's, time for Truth's Table to end, it's not going to be forever,
Right.
But, I think that helps. But then also I think people seeing how faithful we've tried to be, and stewarding very important conversations, critical conversations with nuance and hopefully with some depth and some critical analysis. And we've grown to have the credibility, and trust of people, and they know that we're not messy,
right,
and petty, and so we try to talk about issues and not people, right. So even if we're confronting or we're having issues, we still try to,
does it help having a therapist in Christina Edmondson?
Very helpful.
Dr.
Absolutely. She has a lot of wisdom.
Dr. Edmondson.
She's the wisest person I know.
Same, actually.
She has wisdom. And so I think that's how we've been able, to get to call on people if they want to come on the show to come. But then I think there is an interesting thing about Truth's Table where people sometimes can be a little scared.
Really?
It's a weird thing. I'm like, what?
Is it like the Holy Spirit? It's like,
hello? No, I don't know, right? You have to ask them. But I think there's a way in which they know that we're not afraid to ask the hard questions. We're not afraid to say what needs to be said. And we're not afraid to just tell the truth. And the truth comes with a lot of cost.
Yes.
Literal costs.
Right.
And people are like, wait a minute now, my livelihood is connected to this. I can't go on there.
That's
or I don't want to be, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I think there is a sense in which we have some kind of, we call the Nicodemus listeners. Nick at night.
I'm sure
that
you do.
kind of,
Yeah.
we're like, I listen to I have been listening for years, but I can't show that publicly. Oh,
wow.
It sucks, but it is what it is. But
Right.
yeah, I'm aware it's a weird tension.
Is this like a DM kind of thing where they just say,
Sometimes.
good job.
Sometimes.
Don't credit me publicly.
Sometimes, exactly. Or sometimes I'll be at somewhere and, they'll be like, oh, I listen. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, great. And people that are like super progressive to super conservative. Like,
Interesting.
Oh, yeah. The spectrum is covered, with Truth Table.
Can I ask how you decide what to cover? Is this something, do you meet beforehand? Is there discussion about?
Yeah. So we do usually have a theme, for every season that starts out. So we just kind of stay in prayer about that and think about that. Like we've even just talked about our theme for next season. I was like, I think we need to do that. And just kind of like, we usually are just like, we're usually in sync on that. So we talk about that, and then we kind of conceptualize, okay, like who we want to bring on, what are the areas that we need to cover with a particular topic or issue, and we'll try to figure out who are the experts, that we can bring on to talk about these things. We'll do the intro and why we're doing it, and we'll fill in and host those episodes, just the two of us if we need to. But we don't do a whole lot of planning. Like our show is not scripted. I know people are very surprised by that. I'm like, Truth Table's not scripted. We get on we get on the mic and we talk.
That takes a lot of trust between you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when we started out the show, we didn't know each other in the same way that we know each other now.
Right.
But we had, let's see, our friendship. Let me think. Truth Table's, we were maybe about 2 years into the friendship though by then. But yeah, and we're pretty deep folks, so it's not surface level, but there's much more depth now from 2 years in to 8 years in or however long now Truth Table's been going, or 8 seasons in, sorry.
Right.
But it's been 7 years, so I wasn't that off. But we don't script it. We don't do a lot of scripting at all. We don't do a lot of editing either. Usually sometimes the editing comes into play. It's with an interview that we've done, and I'm like, we're asking the interviewee, are you sure you want that to be on the show? I'm like, we're trying to protect you. I'm sorry.
That's really interesting.
And so okay, we'll remove that.
That is so funny.
Oh yeah. It's usually when interviews happen, I'm like, I don't know if you want us to air that part. And so but but for the most part, the show is not that's heavily really edited. It's just audio stuff, right?
Yeah.
So,
okay, I'm sure you may have heard this joke before, but have you heard the joke that what do you call, I think it's like a group of 3 or more white men?
I don't know.
What's the name for it?
Oh boy.
A podcast.
Okay, there you go.
And so to your point about Truth Table occupying a really singular space, you all are driving a lot of important conversations. You have a broad audience. And I guess I just wondered, when did it dawn on you that you were kind of like making a dent in the conversation?
Yeah. So it's a couple of, because we did come in early into the podcasting world in 2017, right? So that was really early on, in the podcasting world. Now everybody has a podcast. It's kind of like the blogging world.
Oh,
remember
so
that?
True.
It's kind of like, I see the parallels there.
That's true.
And so, it was pretty early on with gender apartheid, that episode, talking about, gender and and sexism within the church and trying to break down those dividing walls and how we should be much more, united together, men and women learning from each other. Novel concept, that we don't always have to be siloed away from each other. I remember that. I remember just the huge backlash and the Atlantic report that came out. It was a lot going on. Huffington Post, there was a lot going on.
That is a lot.
Yeah, it was in that must have been 2017, 2018 that happened. There was that, but then also the Lecrae episode was a big one too. That was maybe 2017, 2018-ish, somewhere
and
there.
For those of you who are not familiar with it, yes, I don't know if you want to summarize kind of what the kind of conversation that Lecrae came to Truth's Table to have and its fallout. I don't know.
Yeah, so, he was just really talking about just the ways, and ironically, I actually wasn't on that episode. Actually,
I remember,
right?
Because I sent it to our mutual friend, Christina Edmondson.
Oh, right, there you go, yeah.
And I had cited both of you, and she was like, "Oh, but remember, it was just, anyway." So
I wasn't in there. Yeah, I wasn't there. Yeah,
so co-creator, but
I couldn't. Yeah, I was traveling. Something happened, and we were all virtual. But anyway, it was a different time.
What a world.
Yeah, now podcasting video.
Yeah.
But anyway, he came on. You really talk about his own experience within evangelicalism and the ways in which he's felt used and confined and conscripted.
I think he'd been called like the mascot of white evangelicalism or something like that. Where it was just like an uneasy relationship.
He took a lot of hits. He took a lot of hits, and so he came in and was really was very honest and transparent on that episode, and it was a very, very popular episode, of course, and of course there's this huge backlash, fallout, and be like, how could he? There was just a lot of repercussions, I think. But subsequently, he also released his All Things Work Together album as well, where he sampled a Truth's Table episode on there. You hear my voice.
That's really cool.
On there too. So there was just a lot. He was just kind of really,
I think with you.
Yeah, and he was just boldly just coming out and just kind of speaking up and against some the ways in which he has felt confined, and maybe even misdefined within those circles, and he paid a cost for doing that very thing. But he also often credits Truth's Table with digging in, just revealing to him some of the misogyny and sexism, and ways in which he had internalized some of that, and how Truth's Table helped undo some of that for him. A lot of that actually for him, and how he realized, I really haven't listened to women, and why is that? And and that's a lot. That's huge. It takes a lot of courage to recognize that, to confess that, and to speak that. And so it's cool to know. It's a blessing to know that you can influence influencers, in that way, right? And so that was really cool, and just the ways in which Truth's Table has continued to influence Bible teachers and others, just within, Christendom, but outside too,
right?
And the ways people talk about that.
When that specific thing was happening, of course, if you were online and paying attention to like broad evangelical conversations, you were seeing that was happening.
When Twitter was Twitter, right? Because that's where we saw it. That was where everybody really lived. I do miss that.
That's right.
It's just different. Yeah.
I do too, actually, even though it could be brutal, but I full disclosure, I've known your co-host, Dr. Christina Edmondson, for a long time.
Yes.
Way before
many years,
she was,
before me.
Well, it's been so wonderful to watch her because she's so wise, and if anyone's going to have a big platform, it ought to be her.
Absolutely.
She's excellent. But I remember really feeling for her and for you, even though it's our first time meeting.
Yeah.
In part, I have a theory to run by you. See what you think about this.
Run it by me.
Okay. I have a theory, which is Reformed people, because this was mostly happening in
that's true.
Reformed spaces. I don't know. Did you grow up in the Reformed tradition at all? Or?
Well, I did grow up Lutheran.
Okay, there we go.
I guess it was it was
a cousin kind of a.
It was kind of Lutheran, Missouri. I did, but it really wasn't until seminary that.
Okay, I have a theory about like the disposition of Reformed people. Which is that they write everything down because Martin Luther,
right.
And so I think Twitter could be a more punishing place if you're a Reformed person. So I grew up in the charismatic tradition, and people have asked me, have people gone after you? Because I have talked about and gotten a little bit of flack about race and racism in the evangelical church and stuff like that, specifically in white evangelicalism. Yeah. But I always joke about, well, no, not really, because if you're charismatic, people are going to like make a song at you
okay, wait,
or
what?
a TikTok video. They're not gonna write a blog post in the same way that a Reformed person would do it. You know,
goodness, that's true.
And when I was watching all of these people, it was
funny.
like Lecrae goes on Truth's Table, and there were maybe 5,000 dudes with keyboards. Just
clickety clack clack.
Does that sound right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh! You said they're gonna make a song about you. That's so funny.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel the same as getting all of these therefore. So
right.
How do you? I guess one question I have for you is how do you manage those waves of?
Oh boy, yeah.
That's it seems from the outside. It seems like a lot to manage.
It is. No, it is. It's really exhausting. It hasn't happened in a long time, although it just happened recently. I was like, this hasn't happened in
friends.
years. Oh my gosh. I was like, not again. I'm tired. I'm like, I'm too old for this. I've been doing this too long. I was like, wait a minute. I've enjoyed my peace. What's happening here? I'm like, stop it. Calm down. But it's exhausting. It's
seems
hard.
Like it.
I think in some ways what I really am a very prayerful person. So I really do try to stay prayerful about, what I speak to, what I don't speak to, what God is calling me to say, asking me to say, be very clear about that, and saying what God told me to say. And so what helps to anchor me is that is what God wanted me to say.
Oh,
that's what I said, what I said. And that's just what it is, so that helps to anchor me. So I'm not like, oh my God, did I mess up? Did I, and I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I am always trying to like, well, no, I really sought after the Lord. This is what God wanted me to say. So that helps me because at least I'm not like wavering on what I said, but trying to wade through the backlash is hard, right? When you're getting called all of these racist and pejorative statements and comments. And I just had to do that, just a couple weeks ago, literally go through my socials and be like, oh my gosh, I'm just kidding. And going through emails, right?
Right.
It is exhausting. I'm not even going to act like it's not. It is very exhausting. It is very tiring, and so I block. For safety, safety purposes,
right.
I'm not. I don't just block people just to block them. But if they're threatening or saying anything racist, I gotta block you. Then I just reach out to friends and accountability people just to pray for me just as I'm going through that and asking and also praying for myself, asking the Lord to defend me and protect me as well. And then also trying to stay off. When the heat is up. Just trying to stay off the socials and just try to guard my heart, really, and my eyes,
right,
as much as I can. But again, it is up to me. I don't have a staff,
right.
I have an assistant.
Your people,
my people.
Yeah,
please go through all my socials and clean it up and block people.
Right.
And I don't have that, so it is on me. But I try to okay, let me just. That's enough for today. We'll try to pick it up tomorrow and do the cleanup job. It sucks, honestly.
I can't imagine. It
sucks. I don't know how to say it.
Because your platform is really large and people are.
It's like
can be very terrible.
They can, and just be disingenuous. It's like, come on, you took that out of context.
In bad faith.
Or it's in bad faith, or it's not that's not. Anyway, but it is what it is. It does. The storm eventually does blow over, but it's exhausting when you're in it. So
can I ask you what brings you the most joy about this kind of work?
Yeah. Well, I love to help people, connect the dots, in the faith. I really hate to see people walk away from Jesus or walk away from the faith, either because of the bad behavior of other Christians. 1, 2, because of oppression. And things that are happening and injustices and really theology, like, oh my gosh, if there's a good God, then why are these bad things happening? So I take a lot of joy, in helping people to make sense of where God might be or what God is speaking to this into, various situations in our world or even in their own personal lives, their interior lives as well. That to me is really encouraging. And just hearing the ways in which it's really encouraging when we hear, for instance, our other podcast, Get in the Word with Truth Table. Truth Table too, but Get in the Word with Truth Table and just how they say, oh, because of that podcast and Truth Table, like, I've gone back to the church. I found a healthy church. I didn't think I would be able to go back because of the church trauma and hurt that I've experienced, but after hearing, just
Right.
your episodes, about the church and just different things, different topics, the many topics that we talk about, I've grown closer to the Lord, or hearing you all read the Bible, and then pray, it just gives me a different lens, to hear the scripture and understand it. And I couldn't read the Bible the whole year because of the things I had gone through or the pain I was feeling, but I could hear it read to me, and so that to me is huge. I think that's amazing. So that gives me joy. It's really just helping people. I don't know. I guess helping people see Jesus more clearly through all of the mess in our world, and
there's
and
there's a good amount of that.
Mess, right?
So I teach at the seminary, and we have seminarians who I think are trying to discern how to develop public theological voices.
Oh, yeah.
And you, I think, are a great example of, this is how you navigate a public theological presence.
Yeah.
Do you have advice for seminarians who are trying to discern? I mean, it could be anything. It could be the theological discernment part of it. It could be practical stuff. Start a podcast. Don't start a podcast. What advice would you have for those?
No, it's good. But, again, I did not seek this calling. God put it upon me. Necessity was laid on me. And so, because I didn't know what public theology was until I started, I was like, oh, this is
just doing it.
And people were like, oh, yeah, wow, yeah, you're doing public theology. I was like, I am.
I am? Oh, I am.
This is like when I first, back in like 2015 or so. And so I didn't really know, right? I didn't have any models. I didn't know who to look to. I didn't know, I didn't.
Right.
I literally, it was just me and Jesus, and I was like, okay, God, there's no job. Where's my job? How am I going to survive? What's going on? And so it was a lot of confusion in the beginning.
Right.
I was like, what's happening with my life? And why? So I didn't seek it out. And so honestly, my advice is always for people to pray. I think we underestimate the power of prayer. We don't do it enough, and ask God to really order our footsteps, right, and to show us. I think we have to study to show ourselves approved too, and then we can also begin in that prayer process. And as we're thinking through these ideas and wrestling with some things, we can actually begin to hone our voice and learn kind of where our specific lane is. Like, like I talk about, gender issues and things in misogyny. That's definitely in the book. But, my lane is obviously is anything doing with race, anti-Black violence, Pan-Africanism. That's really where, but I'm a woman. So, of course, I know the gender lens too. I live it. You know what I mean? But this is where I really live, and I know that, I understand that, and all that comes with that. Also the reparations, work that I do. And so people being able to really parse through and see like, okay, what is your passion? Like really, where is your lane, and just kind of really be excellent, in that. Hone your craft, study, let's not be so quick to jump on the mic. I think that sometimes people want to just hurry up and run to that. And I was like, you don't know how. Wise. Yeah, you just don't know. You can't take these things back.
That's true.
Once it's out there, it's out there. So let's be.
You could hit it in the Atlanta Huffington Post. Yeah.
In a New York minute. And so ask me how I know. Oh. So it's like, just, learn what your lane is. Stay in that lane. Strengthen your gifts, there. And and your gifts truly do make room for you. And the Lord will begin to bring opportunities. That's my experience, is that the Lord will begin to bring these opportunities. I just haven't, all the things that I've done, I haven't sought them out. Even the platform that when Twitter was Twitter, I wasn't seeking that thing out. I wasn't seeking out follow. Like, I just, it was just what God did, right? And I've just been trying to be faithful with the platform God's given. And, then he takes it away. I'm like, okay, that's cool. We're moving on. Like, and so trying to be open with God. I just learned, I was like, you just have to be open because the Lord can just switch up your life in an instant. And you have to be able to, I've learned in ministry, you have to be able to flow.
Right.
Like if God is like, and that's enough, and you are going here now, and you go, okay, I have learned, like to be content. It's not easy. I'm trying, and I'm still learning. Be content with wherever God is taking you, and it's not easy to do. But I came into ministry in a very a little bit of a traumatic way in that I lost my corporate job.
Oh, wow.
Sales job, really suddenly the day before my birthday. And so it's like, wait, this is traumatic, and got rid of our whole sales team. So, I'm like, whoa. So I know things can just shift and change. And so I've just learned like, okay, I just gotta be open, to receive whatever it is that God's going to do. Because God's going to have his way anyway. So
wow.
It can be by force or by grace. I choose grace. And I just go, okay, radical acceptance.
That's so funny. I can't, radical acceptance, God's grace. I can't think of a better way to, better words of advice for our seminarians, or a better way to conclude our time. Ekemini, thank you so much. It has been so wonderful. The time has just flown, and I really appreciate you coming and sharing your work with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Leah.